What makes an image look good? When we look at an image, what exactly is it about that image that makes us stop scrolling on our feeds and pay attention? What is it that we feel in that moment? And more importantly, at least for you watching this right now, how does it communicate that feeling? That's what we're uncovering today in the next installment of What Makes Images Look Good. And this week we have my good friend Demis, who has provided us with some images for showcase and analysis. Now, the goal of this video is finding out what makes an image successful at visually communicating. So in this series, I'm going to be talking a lot about visual patterns, about emotion, and hopefully you can start to see a trend in the visual communication techniques used and the success of an image so that you can start to then build your own sense of good taste. All right, let's get into the first image. So I've known Demis for a very, very long time, and it's really nice to see a progression in his work over the years. But when I think Demis, I think two things. I think composites using Photoshop, and I think architecture. So he submitted 10 images, but I chose the top 5 just because otherwise we'd be going all day. And he has supplied a little bit of context for each image, so we'll go through that before we dive in. Now, for this first image, he has titled it Kuala Lumpur Time Slice. And he says that he created a time-lapse sequence shot during sunset. So he shot this on the A7R4 and the 12-24 f4. This image just screams Demis to me. You know, it's architecturally based. It's very vibrant, very colorful, has a lot of contrast. These are visual patterns that Demis tends to use throughout a lot of his work, and it definitely looks like a Demis image to me. However, this image as a time slice, you know, this is really about the documentation of a scene over a course of time, or over a period of time, in this case, several hours. And it is really about showcasing the beauty of Kuala Lumpur. You know, this is the crown jewel of Kuala Lumpur after all. And the nature and the background and all the colors and stuff like that he managed to get in this image just make this image so much better than all of the other time slices that I've seen. And I'm not being biased here. I mean that very subjectively, or at least as subjectively as I can provide it. It's just, there's a lot going on and it's very interesting to look at. One thing that I did want to call out here from a technicality perspective is that in true architecture fashion, this is something that I appreciate tremendously. Demis's use of lines and spacing is top tier, literally like top tier. And a great example of this is that the two towers here, right? You have the two towers on the left and the right. This line here is the exact center of the image. And he's also managed to place this splice on that center line. And this is important because the cool thing about this, as we zoom in here, is that now we know that this is exactly absolute center. He has aligned it with the very center of this connecting bridge, but also, and this is great, and this is very Demis, he has aligned the edges of this tower and this distance between the center line and the edge of the tower to be exactly the same as this distance to the center of the tower. And so because they're exactly the same, it's tremendously balanced. It's super balanced and is a definite kind of homage to his architectural design skills, because he used to be an architect, but he has an eye for these things. He has an eye for spacing. And spacing is something that you don't automatically grow up really knowing a lot about. And especially in, like, if you're a designer in any design space, whether it's graphic design or, you know, architecture or anything where you're visually solving problems, UI, whatever, you have to build a sense of spacing and proportion and balance and harmony. And you have to really work on the skill of that for yourself. It's not something that comes to you naturally. And especially in photography, you know, blending that sense of balance And that sense of spacing with photography, especially architectural photography, I think is such a really cool combination, and something that I really want to call out, because that is also something that I'm very cognizant of as well. And it's something he nails absolutely every single time. One of the other things that I wanted to call out is that he uses the Sony 12-24G lens. It's an f4 lens quite a lot. And that lens is super wide. It's 12 millimeters, full frame. You know, you see everything. It's crazy. And this is amazing for architecture in general. You don't have a lot of space. There's a lot of things in front of you. You know, things can look a lot bigger or a lot more grander than they might seem in real life, and so on and so forth. The problem with really, really wide lenses is usually the perspective distortion that you gain from that. And especially when you're shooting cityscapes, it comes up all the time. What he has done here, and you might not notice this yourself, but once you see it, you'll never unsee it, is that when you shoot buildings, usually because buildings are much, much taller than you on the ground, usually buildings like this one on the right here, the perspective actually will look more like this, right? This corner of the building here, instead of it being straight, it will be more like this, and it will have a perspective distortion to it. You know, so this building might look like this, for example. But what Demis always manages to do is he goes into Lightroom or wherever, and he corrects that distortion so that, and we can see this illustrated here quite well, is between these two time slices, you know, there's obviously a straight line. You know this is going to be a straight line because the rest of the image is a straight line as well. But in addition, the entire building is also straight too. My line isn't straight, but the building is straight. And every single building, whether that is, you know, this one or this one that like just so neatly lines up with the time slice there as well. Even this one and the connection between the two here, they're all straight. Every single one is straight. And again, this is something that you won't see absolutely everyone doing. But once you do notice it, you'll never unnotice it, especially when it comes to cityscapes like this. So yeah, really good job on this one. It's a very unique technique and a very unique take on a time slice, and yeah, really enjoy this one. All right, this next one here, Demis says this is the Pompidou Center in Paris. He says it's a very interesting piece of architecture that I've wanted to visit since I studied about it during uni. The services that usually go inside a building, which are, you know, plumbing, electrical, pipes, and etc., are exposed on the outside of the building, and that was what I wanted to capture in this image. And then the streak of light on the ground was quite lucky, and I waited for a person to walk into the light. And he shot this on the same setup as before, the A7R4 and the 12-24 GF4. So this, again, is Demis in a nutshell when it comes to his photography. It's architecture, and that's one of the things that I really love about Demis's work, is that he has he's classically studied architecture as a profession. He was an architect, and he shoots architecture, amongst other things, of course. But when I think of Demis, I think amazing architecture images, and he's always hunting for those types of images whenever we're out. You know, we've been on so many different shoots together, domestically, nationally, internationally, etc. And he's always looking for patterns, lines, grids, texture, shapes, you know, anything like that. And I think this image is again him. In terms of shapes, we can see what he was talking about. So all of these blue pipes here, and then there, and this stack in the middle. You know, there's stacks of 4, and then there's 3 stacks. And then there's also these lines that come across this building, and that's just so interesting. There's also these diagonals here as well, if you didn't notice those as well, all across the image here. Really just super interesting. And then he did mention something about the slice of light down here as well, and then he waited for that person to come. And that's great, But really, when you look at this image, especially if you're like squinting or you look at it from far away, or you're trying to get an initial impression about it, the figure is not the main focus of the image. The figure serves here as an accent, as a nice to have. In this instance, it serves as a reference to actually scale. You know that this is the size of a normal human being, and this is what humans are great for when it comes to using scale as a visual pattern. You generally know how tall a human is going to be. And so relative to the rest of the frame, if you ever see a human, you know, oh, okay, a human's this kind of size. That means this structure is going to be X times as big as, the person. And so you have a relative gauge for the rest of the scene. And that's why including small people in big places is such a powerful technique when it comes to scale because of that reference. Now, this image is all about showcasing the architectural lines of the building itself. Amazing. But one thing that I wanted to call out that he's done here is he's really timed it well. So I see people do this all the time, making the very classic mistake of not timing people when they're walking, right? So you can see here the person has their front leg straight and then their back leg curved. And it looks like they're walking. They have what's called, a gait. They have a gait in their stride. And whenever you're capturing people, whenever you're capturing them walking, moving, whatever, whether it's your legs or whether it's your arms like that, you've got to wait for the perfect moment that shows the body movement of them moving, right? Because as humans, we can often be locked in a situation where, you're capturing side on like this, but then your arms are like stiff. And so you don't know that the person is moving or not. And this gait, this particular gait where the back leg is, slightly 45, shows us that the person is walking. If this leg wasn't there and it was just two straight legs because it was like mid-stride or something like that, this would not have been as successful in terms of evoking that emotion of moving. So whenever you're trying to shoot someone, make sure that you wait till the perfect moment for their gait to appear and make it look like they're actually doing what they're doing, in this case, walking. So if you're capturing someone running, right, you would want the widest gait possible so that you could then show people this is how hard this person is running. This is how gigantic their gait is. So you can kind of gauge how fast they're going. This is a really important tip, but Demis has definitely nailed that. I think as a preference thing, the light kind of only comes to about here. And so I personally would have waited for the next gate over. So like maybe around here for this person. So then the straight leg would have been here, and then, the back leg would have been there, and whatever the case may be, just so that it aligns more towards the middle of the light patch. But yeah, that's a personal preference thing. Definitely no marks off. He's included that very, very close to the center line. So in a way, there's lots of these different lines that kind of lead towards the person like this. But again, the person serves as an accent to the rest of this image and definitely not the main focus of it whatsoever. But yeah, definitely really nice image. You've heard me talk about this before. If, again, a preference thing for me, all of this crosswork is kind of nice, a little bit distracting from the vertical lines of here. And so for all of like this kind of area, I would have like put a graduated filter over the bottom of it and then like kind of slid it up and turn down the exposure on it just so that it gets out of the way and you are signaling to the viewer that this particular portion of the image is not important. And as a photographer, I would rather you look up here instead. Again, that's a personal preference thing, and yeah. Otherwise, really, really good. Definitely reminds me of Demis to a T. Okay, if you're enjoying this video so far, I would really appreciate it if you would hit that like button for me so that I know it's good enough to make even more free videos just like this one in the future. Alrighty, the next image we have from Demis is of Shirahige Shrine in Lake Biwa, Japan. This was actually one that he did recently on our most recent trip around Kansai, which you can find a vlog of on the channel. So he submitted a little bit of a caption on this as well. He says, "Shot this at a very low angle camera, almost touching the water to accentuate the texture of the water with the shrine as the focal point. Again, got lucky with the birds flying past and shot this on the same setup. So the Sony a7R4 plus the 12-24G lens." So with this image, you know, I've seen Demis comp in birds so many times. And I think for me, this almost looks like it could have been comped in, but he said he got it IRL. And I think the amount of luck that you need to have this arrangement of birds with this, you know, particular composition is amazing. And I think he's done an amazing job of capturing that and being there at the right time, ready for that to happen. I think that is the biggest thing for a lot of people. If you see and notice birds flying around the subject that you're trying to shoot, make note of where they are and then be ready for it so that you can then capture it like this, because it does add to the composition, in my opinion anyway. I think this would have been, this isn't a minimal shot per se. You know, I've done a shot of this in the past before, which is super, super minimal, long exposures and all of that. But because there's so much textures in the sky and there's so much texture in the water, it's not a very minimal image. It's still a simple image, but there's a lot of interesting things going on in it as well. And so, you know, having the birds here really accentuates that, in my opinion. And I think it's a really nice addition to the composition. He's also, as a little bit of an aside, you know, I was here on this day. I've shot this shrine before, but he had never shot this shrine. And so he went off and went to go shoot it. And then I stayed in the main shrine area because it was just wet, miserable. It was raining. I had my umbrella out. You know, there was a lot of clouds, although they didn't look like this. And I'll overlay some B-roll of just how, you know, drab the conditions were. But I think for that particular condition, he nailed this one really, really well. I'm actually really impressed that he managed to get this kind of shot with such crappy conditions. Very, you know, huge kudos to him. This is a really good rendition. Again, this is a classic architectural eye going on. We have this horizon line directly vertical center of the image. We have the very center of the torii gate lining up with the absolute horizontal center of the image. Just perfect balance. And then everything else, you know, the texture on the water, the texture in the clouds is just such a lovely addition to this image. It does still feel a little gloomy, and you know, that might be because of the grade, but also the clouds and all of that kind of stuff. But still, I think it's quite nice as a different kind of technique for what you could do with this image. I've shot this as a long exposure, and that smooths out all of the waves and would smooth out all of the clouds as well. That's one thing that you can do. You know, whenever you do see water, the first thing you should be thinking about is, I could do this as a long exposure. Because that's just another option for you if you ever want to spice things up and try a different composition or anything like that. But, you know, otherwise, yeah, really, really great job for the conditions. And I love the texture. I love how, you know, real it is. I love that he got super lucky with the birds and stuff like that. Yeah, good image. Alrighty, two more here. And this one is he says it's a 50-50 day to night split of the Colosseum in Rome. Shot these two images in the morning and then at night and lined it up manually in post. Same setup, so A7R4 12-24G. And I just wanted to call out, again, Demis's architectural eye. In this instance, it is a very obvious horizontal split down the middle. But that lens is it's difficult to handle for a lot of people. In this instance, what it's done is you can see all the clouds kind of like have this real, wispy, but from the center outwards kind of look. And sure, that might be a little bit to do with the clouds on that day, but a lot of it is also to do with the distortion, the perspective distortion, and then correcting it by stretching it out. So again, this is a very difficult lens to use and to master, but Demis is once again just nailed the correction on that, and it looks fantastic. This image is all about the details. It is all about, I mean, it's the Colosseum in Rome, right? So from an emotional perspective, from a communication perspective, he's showcasing the building and its grandiosity, both in the morning and in the nighttime. And that's about as, far deep as, it needs to go, really. You could think of it as more in terms of story or anything like that. But really, for me, the crux of this is technical execution. Did he nail everything? So in this instance, all of this highlight stuff over here at night, perfectly controlled. You can see all this like texture in the highlights, in the really, really bright highlights over here. A little bit blown out in this kind of area here, which is, totally fine, but it adds to the ambiance as well. But the one thing that is the biggest thing when I'm thinking technique is actually the center bit. And specifically where all of these joins line up. Every single one of these joins are absolutely spot on perfect. There is like not a single join that doesn't align the way that it should align. And that is not an easy feat. That is not an easy thing to do, especially when in order to do it, you would have to rock up to a place, right? You take the shot and then you kind of mentally remember, okay, I shot it at this mark or this crack in the road, or maybe there's like a thing there that you can like kind of reference point your way around and then return back to it at a later date, and then stand in exactly the same spot, exactly the same height, take exactly the same shot. Chances are you're going to be off. Chances are you're not going to have a tripod planted there the entire day, especially at the Colosseum at Rome. And so you would have to kind of wing it and do it freehand. And that's really, really hard. And so I'm sure there was a lot of fajangling in Photoshop to line these up. But the point is he has paid attention to that detail so that it does perfectly line up and it looks great. One thing I wanted to address in this image in particular, now that we've seen kind of two images that are composites, right? They are images that are not specifically single images, raw, shot straight out of camera and then edited or whatever. They are two deliberate images in this case, or many, many deliberate images in the first case of the time slice. It begs the question, what is a photograph? And sure, there is a kind of, not movement, but there is a minority consensus about what true photography actually is, and that it needs to, come out of camera or, be raw or like not be JPEG or not even be processed by Lightroom. And then you have like the other side of things where it's like, it's photoshopped. You can use Photoshop. You can change things around. You can remove things, generative AI, blah, blah, blah. And there's like obviously AI generated imagery and all the rest of it. But this is most obviously for me a collection of two images that are stacked on top of each other, that both are edited in such a way that it's trying to represent real life at two different times. And you just can't do that with a single image. You have to do that with multiple images. And I think food for thought anyway, the idea of what a photograph is changing so much, especially now with AI and the amount that Photoshop is being used all the time. Demis's work over the years has been very Photoshop heavy, I would say. And when I think about his stuff, it's always like, okay, what is the question of what is a photograph? And then the follow-up question of it is, what does it matter to you? You know, do you want your photographs to be absolutely 100% as you see them in real life kind of thing? Is that what a photograph is to you? Or is it an image that, you know, makes you feel a particular way, has emotion? Is that what an image is to you? Or is it something that has been, you know, put together to communicate something, to say something, to illustrate a place at two different times of day, right? What is an image to you, and where do you want to take your photography, and where do you want to live in terms of where you're making your imagery? I think food for thought for you. But this image definitely sparks that idea for me. I'm personally of the opinion that for me and my photography anyway, this is perfectly acceptable and is most certainly counted as a photograph. This wouldn't be an accurate depiction of, I would say, real life, but it is something that is an image. It started life as an image, and it hasn't been edited to the point. Like, there's always a line, right? Especially, you have to find your own line, but especially for me, this line has most certainly not been crossed or anything like that. This for me is a lovely take on trying to be different in a world where everyone rocks up to the Colosseum and takes the same image. Alrighty, so this is the last image from Demis, and this was shot in Barcelona in Spain. And he says, a morning stroll around the streets of Barcelona when I spotted these epic light rays at the end of the street. After I took this shot, I walked to the end of the street and found out the light was coming from dust particles from a construction site. Very unexpected, but so epic to see in real life. This one was also shot in a little bit of a different setup. So we've got the A7R4 and the 7200 f2.8 G Master Mark I. This image for me evokes a very strong emotion about, you know, just the life of an average person in the early morning of the day. I've been to Barcelona. I know what it looks like. This for me is like exactly what I remember it to be like when I was strolling around the streets, taking street images and stuff like that when I was on my trip as well. For him and this image, he has gotten so lucky with those rays because, you know, there are so many other people who would just Photoshop those in. And he, in this instance, has just got it done so well. So very, very lucky guy. This is a great rendition of that. One thing I wanted to call out for this is, you know, oftentimes in these kind of images, you see a single person. Just, you know, that's my stick figure. One person in the middle. Street photography is street photography, and sometimes you can't find just one singular person in an image, and, you know, you take what you can get. In this instance, he has taken a two-person approach. This person and this set of people, these are actually two people. One of them is like holding a dog, and then she's in the kind of silhouette of the person in front over here. So I would count that as like two figures, as in like one and then like two. But that's only me. But one of the things that, again, coming back to his architectural eye, is that he has split them down the middle again. So this is the horizontal middle, and they are exactly even, which is amazing. Like, if you're gonna do two, do it in this way. Otherwise, three would have been better. You know, like three people here. There's my stick figure again. But yeah, odd numbers are usually better. But if you're gonna do two people, then yeah, for sure do it equally and like this. This is really, really nice. One of the other things he's done is kind of darkened the sides. Not too much. You know, there's going to be a lot of reflected and bounced light around, especially with all of this. You know, these are all kind of like a warmish, creamish color, yellowish, orangish, and they're going to project light and spill light all the way down the street. And so in real life, it's probably, he's only cranked that down just a little bit. And I think that has a nice effect of narrowing your focus down to, you know, these central figures down here. There's also a little bit of a cheeky leading line on the road down here, which is really nice as well. Kind of the same thing as some of the other feedback. You know, I would have kind of put a very slight graduated filter down here, exposure down kind of thing, just so that you know it's not important. You know, there's a lot of contrast here. What you can see in terms of pattern, right? So if you are kind of looking at this from a zoomed in perspective, let's take like this portion here. You have light, like dark, light, dark, light, dark, light. And so from a zoomed out perspective, you're like, wow, this is a very interesting image. And that's why he got so lucky. And, you know, he's able to make such a great tonal contrast and something very, very visually interesting in that manner. Good stuff. Alrighty, I think we will leave it at that for this third episode of What Makes Images Look Good. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you enjoyed Demis's work. Please go and follow him on Instagram, and then let me know who else you would like to see on this new series so that we can work to make it even better and better for you guys in the future. All right, I'll see you in the next video, but until then, get out there and make something that matters. Peace.